Our next project is what we call a continuous sleeve placket. This creates a finished edge for a slit opening in a sleeve where you would probably apply a cuff right here on a men's shirt sleeve or a woman's sleeve. So we're going to finish this raw slit that's in the middle of it with this binding fabric. And these are the steps that we will take. You want the binding to be twice as long as the slit. So I'm going to make a slit. Half as long as my binding. Okay, then the first step will be lining up the top edges and the raw edges of one corner of the binding and one side of the slit, and now we will stitch that seam. My binding is 2 inches wide, so I'm going to use a seam allowance that's a 1/2 inch, and that will produce a binding that's a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to start right here on the 1/2 inch seam line. You can choose the width you want your binding to be and your placket to be at any time. From this point, my placket has to come in a diagonal slant out to that 1/2 inch seam line. So the point right here will look like it's got pleats and folds in it, which it does, but I'm not going to stitch those pleats in. I'm going to stitch very close to the fabric edge and not stitch the folds in. But I'm also not stitching right over the pin. I'm going to take it out. I'm still staying on this seam line. And I have a little extra binding. So my goal was to create this lined slit with no puckers stitched in it right here. They're wrinkled in, but they'll press out. Then the next step for this is to press it. So let's go to the ironing board. I first want to press all of this seam towards the placket binding, right up to the point and beyond it. That will make this side all smooth and flat. Now I want to wrap this binding around all those raw edges. So first I'm going to press it to the center. And then I'm going to fold it in half one more time, and this time I'm folding it just a little beyond the stitching. So it covers the stitching. Okay, now we'll sew that down. And I'm going to sew from the outside. I can either top stitch this, and my stitching will show and it will be right on the edge, or I can understitch, can stitch in the ditch. So my stitching will disappear in this crack between the binding and the sleeve. I think for today I will top stitch it. And my hope with that is that I did catch all of the other side as I went down, so that will stay attached as well. Now that edge is nicely finished and bound, and I want to turn all the placket the same direction, towards one side, towards the inside. And you can at this point choose whether the placket faces the right or the left. And then you'll iron this so that the puckers are smooth and flat. But after you choose which direction you want the placket to face, it depends on whether it's a right sleeve or a left sleeve that you want to look into it and not see the seam allowance. Then you lift up the fabric and sew the placket corner at a diagonal so that it will always stay shut nicely. You start at the inside stitched edge, do a few stitches and backtack, stitch the diagonal right to the edges and backtack, and then trim those threads. And that way your placket always stays shut to the side you want it to be. You might also, to be sure of that, baste this side flat. So now the placket, this placket opens this direction, and it always looks nice. And if I press that, it will have no wrinkles. That's a sleeve placket.